All right, folks, welcome. This is going to be a fun one. I'm going to give you the fastest crash course that I possibly can into Blender 3D in case you've never used a 3D program. I'm no expert, but I know a few of the basics and I've used a lot of similar 3D packages. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump out of the screen and take you to Blender 3D. So go ahead to blender.org and download whatever the latest version of Blender 3D is for your respective operating system. Blender does change a lot, so it is best to download the latest version and continue learning with it, whether it is adding more features or bug fixes. So once you've downloaded Blender, go ahead and launch it. In Linux, this means unzipping the file and just going through and hitting run. Mac and Windows will have very simple installers that you can follow. So once Blender starts running, one of the changes that I've made here is I've gone to Preferences and I've changed my resolution scale to be as large as possible so you can follow along in the video. So your interface might look a little bit different and the icons might be smaller, but I like to make them big because I have a bigger monitor and it's easier on our eyes and for this video. You can go ahead and change themes and various settings here as well. And perhaps if you're used to another 3D tool and just want to try out Blender, you can change the keys to match some other tool. For example, there might be better key bindings if you're used to using Maya 3D that you want to use in Blender, and that's totally fine. Now, Blender is a fully featured tool, so we're not going to talk too much about all the other features such as animation, rendering, compositing, scripting, texturing, sculpting, and so on. I just want to show you modeling very simply. So when you click on the Modeling tab, or you can just select Edit Mode when you're ready to edit the geometry of this object, that will be our goal today, to just edit and build some very, very simple object from this cube. So I can also hit Escape if I've done something wrong, or just go back to object mode here. Now, for basic navigation, you can use the mouse cursor, or the mouse wheel rather, to zoom in and out around this pivot point here. If I hold it down, I can orbit the pivot point here and move around. If I want to select different objects, I can select them in 3D space by clicking on them, or in my scene collection on the right, just click on these objects. Deleting will delete them, and Ctrl+z will usually undo most of the actions that we do. So we don't need a light, we don't need a camera for this scene, we just need our simple cube geometry. Okay, so another useful tip is if you have a keypad, you can press the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 keys to move around. The 1 key, for example, will move you to the front of the object. And this is how I like to center myself. So I'm going to go ahead and just move back into perspective though as we start to edit. Okay, so let's go ahead back into edit mode. And you'll notice there's different ways that we can edit. We can either change the vertices individually and move them around, and that's selected here. The edges, and I can select them, or the faces, which I'm also selecting that I want to edit. Now, let's go ahead and move something around. So as soon as I select something, I can use this toolbar here to change the objects. And you'll notice little shortcuts if you hover over them. So G for move, for example, will move one of the vertices. And I can right click if I'm not happy with it, or left click once I'm happy with the change. And I'll undo. I can do Shift while selecting and left clicking, and then do another G move, and this will move both of the vertices together. So depending on how many objects or parts of the geometry that I've selected, I'll move the object around. I'm going to go ahead and use the shortcuts 1, 2, and 3 just on my keyboard, not on the keypad, to go into different modes. So 3 for faces, 2 for edges, and you'll notice that if I select the face mode in 3 and then hit 1 to move back in vertices, then I'll have all 4 of the vertices selected, which is really handy. Okay, so let's get to our goal here and just make a really, really simple object. I haven't even decided what it'll be. Maybe a sword or a very simple weapon, if we like. Okay, now let's talk about our navigation just a little bit more. So it might not be enough to just orbit an object, but I might want to pan around. So if I hold Shift and middle click, that will also help me pan around the screen. And then I can zoom, pan around, and then zoom into an object here. Okay, so that'll be enough tools to get me started. Okay, now I need to be able to create some more geometry here. So how can I do that? Well, I can either right click and I'll get a context menu, and you'll notice this is the vertex context because we're in mode 1. If I click on the edges here, and then right click, here's all the things I can do to edges. And if I click on face and then select a face and then right click, here's all the things, or at least a subset of things that I can do with faces. Most of these things are also on the right as well, as far as different operations. So these are the different ways to manipulate the polygons. I'm going to show you a really simple technique, which is called box modeling, to make some object. So what I can do is hit E for extrude, and then I'll drag my mouse up to extrude this new geometry. What extrude has done is, you can imagine it as grabbing the geometry, and then I'm pulling it up, and you can see the new faces that were created around. Okay, so that's the idea of extruding. Now, in this case, what I might want to do is hit 1 just so I can see my object from the front here. And let me move around a little bit and center. Okay, so we can now see our object here. And maybe I want to select some geometry, so I can also do that by a selection view if I want to. But I'm just going to make a really simple sort of linear object here. Let's make a little sword or something like King Arthur would have. So I've learned how to move geometry around with G, and there's different tricks like hitting GG twice if I want to sort of slide it up or down, or use different gizmos to sort of, for example, I can hit on the transform here and drag along an arrow. There's different ways to scale here. I can rotate by grabbing onto these handles, and you can see how the geometry deforms appropriately. I'm going to do Ctrl+z a few times just to move it back into place. And again, do this really simple. I'm just going to hit the S key, which will scale here and make things smaller. I'm not quite happy with that. Let me scale and move outwards and make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so let's go ahead and select a new edge here and hit E again to extrude. And I'll make this a little bit bigger here. I'll zoom out. Let's extrude one more time and maybe scale again. Okay, and let's go ahead and extrude once more. So this can be, say, the handle of the sword, and then I'll extrude again, just a little bit, scale, make it a little bit larger, extrude again. So this is sort of the handle of our sword here. Maybe I want to make this a little bit pointed here at the bottom here, so I'm just going to scale it again and bring it in a little bit closer there. Okay, now I'll go ahead and select the top here, and, well, what do I want to do here? Let's go ahead and extrude again, and I'll scale, but I want to scale maybe towards here. Let's start making the blade. Okay, and I'll hit 1 here just to go ahead and center here. And let's just go ahead and extrude all the way up here. And we're going to make a really simple sword here. Maybe this isn't King Arthur's sword, but somebody else's. And let's see. Maybe I will just move this up again with G or GG so that it slides up nicely. Or I can just drag here with the transform tool. So I'm dragging just along the y-axis when I select the blue up arrow here. And that looks pretty good to me. I'll hit 1, and yeah, let's go ahead and just finish this off. I'll select the top face here. I'll hit E to extrude one more time, click, and then let's go ahead and just scale this so it's a sharp tip there. Okay, so I'm gonna hit 1 again, and yeah, this looks good enough to me. One thing just to make it a little bit interesting is I'm going to go ahead and select one of these faces. I'll hit 1, and then you can hold Control and then click, right-click outwards, and it'll sort of extrude in that direction. And if you are in a front-facing mode, so this orthographic mode here, it'll actually be aligned to that axis, so I don't have to do anything there. So let's go ahead and just make this a little bit more interesting. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I can still hold Shift and middle click to pan around. And let's go ahead and extrude here just a little bit to make it sort of interesting. And let's scale this down a little bit. Maybe something like this here. Click, and then I will scale it. And I'll move out here, move it a little bit down here. And let's do the same for the other side. Now we could mirror this, and there's better ways to do this, but I'm going to make it a more interesting sword here and extrude sort of downwards, just very slowly. And I'll go ahead and scale this as well. And here is our sword here. So I don't know if this is mighty enough for King Arthur, but again, it's in 10 minutes what I can teach you in Blender, a simple technique known as box modeling, and you can sort of see the object and something perhaps to be proud of. Now there's all sorts of different techniques we might use and other tools such as quick ways to select edges. In fact, I want to just tidy this up a little bit here. I could play around with this all day. If I select either of the edges, and I'll show you, Bevel is kind of useful sometimes for shifting around some of the faces here. Let's see if it'll bevel properly in Blender here. Whoops, let's see, just a little bit. There we go. Oh, didn't do quite what I wanted to do. Yeah, that's good enough here. So it gave a little bit of a sharper edge there to our sword, just a little bit of roundness. Some other tricks that we could do is to just select the entirety of the object here and make sure that I've selected everything. And again, visit that context menu and perhaps subdivide it to give it more geometry. And then I might do something like go into the edge mode and either select these all at once, or you can select what's called an edge loop, and then maybe move some of these edges out again, just to give a little bit of depth to our object. So again, you can do this as sort of one edge at a time. This is how I learned to do the modeling. So I'm just going to show you that here. I just want to show you how to give a little bit of depth. There's all sorts of shortcuts in Blender for this sort of stuff, but this tends to work pretty well. And you can see if I misselect an edge, I'm just holding Shift again to re-click it as I'm doing the selection. And then let me use GG to just kind of slide the edges outwards. Let's see if I can just move this properly. And I'm just going to kind of guess here for now. That's good enough. So you can see that the object is now trying to have some depth here. So the last thing I'll show you is for some of the options, if I hit E, for example, and let's go to the tip of our sword, and let me select a few of these faces here. Let's make our weapon just a little bit more dangerous. I can hit alt+E, and that will give me a different menu for alternative ways to extrude. So I might want to extrude the faces along the normal, the direction that they face, and then I'll scale them, okay? So that's one way I can move things. So for example, if I select these, if I just hit extrude, it'll move out in this direction. alt+E, again, extrude faces along normals. In this case, it is moving along the normal, which is fine. And then let's see, if I do alt+E again, I might want to extrude the individual faces so that they're not together. And then I could maybe scale them, for instance, or move them around individually. This way they're not attached here. As you can see, they're separate. Normally when you extrude, they're sort of welded together, the individual vertices, but in this case, they are not. So I don't know if you want to add like a little edge or something there. Anyway, that's just the alternative menu here. Okay, so let me just return here. This is what I've shown you how to create. Maybe you'll create a skyscraper, something interesting, and many more if you are artists, and we'll create something even cooler. So I'll leave it at that in about 14.5 minutes. That's Blender, so hopefully you can get downloaded, get started, and create something cool.